Slowly but surely, I eventually find myself in the centre of town. Yet even here, the traffic may be moving, but the raised manhole covers now take their turn to potentially ruin my day. But after 6 grueling hours, this purgatory is over. Well, there were moments in the last 4 hours that I really didn't think I'd make it here, but we have, and we've made it to the centre of Moscow. And that really brings that 2,300 kilometre ride to an end. But it's just the start of my time in Moscow. As morning breaks over Moscow, the city and its inhabitants may be starting just another day, but for me, being here is a revelation, mainly because I've made it unscathed. Well, after 2 weeks on the road, I must say it is great to be in Moscow. Now, it's home to 11 million people, and the city is one fascinating place. Moscow is infamous as a city of superlatives. It's home to about 1/10 of the entire Russian population. It boasts the most billionaires in any city in the world. Its economy is growing even in these troubled times by 20% per annum. But it's also been voted in a recent poll the most unfriendly city on the planet. The new rich flaunt their wealth, while the poor majority still try and scratch a living, witnessing the massive cultural divide that Western capitalism has brought. Either way, life for the very rich here in Moscow has never been so good. So where do the Moscow elite chill out and relax? Well, how about here? This is Cafe Pushkin, and it is one of the most famous and probably one of the most expensive restaurants in the whole of Moscow. It's the perfect place to plan the acquisition of your next oil field. Once home to governmental top brass, and I'd like to believe KGB officers in mink coats, it's now a favourite for Russian oligarchs, with a dinner for 2 costing about £300. Well, even though Cafe Pushkin is world famous, there is another restaurant just on the other side of the square that has its own place in culinary history. Well, this is McDonald's. In the 1990s, this was the first ever Western restaurant to come to Russia. And to this day, it is the biggest McDonald's in the whole of Europe, and arguably it is more culturally important than even Cafe Pushkin. Mainly because with queues that stretched right round the block, its arrival was seen as a defining moment that heralded the arrival of Western capitalism. An aspiration that now, for the lucky few, has manifested itself into untold wealth. Now, after you've dined at Cafe Pushkin, you may well come back to here. This is the most expensive street in Moscow, and apartment prices start at about $30 million a pop, and they go up to over 100 million. To live here in the Ostazenka area, just next to the Kremlin, you really do need to own a small oil field. That larder obviously is a window cleaner who's come down here, because otherwise he'd be shot. This polarity of the haves and the have-nots is something that shapes the dichotomy of Moscow today. Innately, it's that dream of a better life that drives the vibrancy and the buzz of the city. And all this is being played out under the watchful and rather sinister gaze of old Russia, immortalised by buildings like the Kremlin. Moscow is somewhere you have to experience. It's quite unlike any other city I've visited. But alas, its drivers still leave a lot to be desired. If you want a defining image of what sums up Russian drivers, take a look at that Nissan, all right? Now, it's just been parked in the middle of the road with its hazard lights on. The guy's just quite happily done his business, getting in the motor. I mean, parking in the main street in the middle of Moscow just like that, to me seems crazy. If only I could have spent more time in Moscow rather than on the M8 trying to get here. But I guess the traffic jams are the price Muscovites are paying for the newfound legacy of Western materialism. Well, I guess it's that time as ever to reveal whether the route from St. Petersburg to Moscow truly is a world's greatest motorcycle ride.